So I've been diagnosed with mild autism or autistic traits, and with ADHD and OCD and Tourette's, and with the depression and anxiety that comes with all of it. It sounds like a lot of different things, but they're all actually there's a high rate of comorbidity with it, because they they're all sort of symptoms of each other. A lot of them, compulsiveness is the same, is because of the same parts of the brain that cause Tourette's as OCD. So, but in my case, it's not immediately obvious to people who don't know me that I have these things, because well, I didn't know about these things. I wasn't diagnosed with these things until after I was already at university. So I became very, very good at masking them, which for people who don't know, masking is just basically being able to act, even subconsciously, having defense mechanisms that explain away your idiosyncrasies so that people think you're normal, right? The reason for that is because when you act out of the norm, you get, from a very young age, you get backlash against it.
So what do you want employers to know about autism, or what do you think is important for them to know about autism?
I think it's important for them to know that it doesn't mean that someone is going to be less good necessarily for a job in the first place. In some cases, it can make you better for certain jobs. It's kind of like just like a different way of thinking almost, and it has its benefits and drawbacks that can be leveraged in the workforce.
Yeah, so tell me a bit about those benefits and drawbacks. So let's start with the benefits first. So what strengths and contributions do you think people with autism or autistic people can bring to the workforce?
Not to be too specific, but a broadened worldview, I suppose, is one. Is when you see things from a different perspective, you can have ideas that other people might not see as easily. And because there's such a neurological difference, there's a lot of opportunity for those sorts of things to happen, where you could be like, oh wait, but what about this that most people hadn't considered? But there's also some idiosyncrasies that are helpful in some cases as well. Some people with autism, I know, are very particular about the things that, or can be very particular about the things that are important to them. And it can cause or facilitate a kind of dedication that that most people might not have to, to even small things that bring them joy, or bring you joy.
So it sounds like that ability to avoid groupthink, bringing that, unique perspective on things that other people might not be able to see, is a real benefit. And also the dedication and the loyalty. If, a person with autism finds a workplace that brings out all of their interests and things that they're passionate about, that can be a real benefit too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about more of those, some of the drawbacks or other considerations that employers might have to take into account when hiring somebody with autism.
Um, well, I think a lot of the drawbacks are, to be honest, more to do with other people rather than the employee themselves. Um, it's about social skills and that sort of thing. There are benefits and drawbacks even in that space, where a benefit could be that, say you've got some sort of customer service kind of role. There are people that would want to engage with your business more because of that more diverse representation that they can identify with. But at the same time, there are also people who, that would make them feel uncomfortable because they don't identify with that person as well, or they they find interaction with them difficult. And for some people, that can make them feel uncomfortable. And so that's a bit of a drawback. I think another drawback can be on related lines, especially for people with more severe forms of autism. They might not automatically receive the same respect from their co-workers as everyone else by default. And that could be a major drawback both for the company and also for the individual, as far as like work satisfaction goes, but also as far as employee relations. That would be something that, that they have to keep an eye on.
So what can employers do, I guess, to prevent that from happening? Or in other words, how can they make their workplaces more inclusive and more welcoming for people with autism or autistic people?
Well, see, that's a very difficult question, because it's really about how do you change human behavior, and that's something that's very difficult to do. How did you manage people in general? But I think one thing that could be done is to is workplace education, so that co-workers as well as higher ups understand the benefits that that can be brought, and also education and training if necessary to ensure that someone in the workplace who is a bit different is thought of as one of the workplace and not as something other. Sort of recognized as peers and individuals.
So would you say like the attitudes of employers and colleagues, that would be perhaps the biggest barrier to people?
Yes, I believe so, yeah. And for some people that's a lot easier, but not everyone. And sometimes you need to have a bit of patience, and not everyone has patience. But I think something as well that would be worthwhile, not just for employees, but also for customers in general, is accessibility. And it's the same for any product or service. It's the same at work. It's the same at university. The fact of the matter is that designing for the disabled, or designing for to cater for a wider variety of people, is just good design, not just because it's good for those people, but it's good for your business and it's good design for people who are normal or, neurotypical. It's a case of, if you design for everyone, you design better for everyone. Design with that sort of flexibility in mind. And
universal design.
Yeah, exactly. And these things benefit everyone. One thing that Woolworths has done, I think it's Woolworths has done, for example, is they sometimes they'll have like a weekly time where they have the lights dimmer and, turn off or turn down the music and have fewer people in the store. And that's beneficial for, obviously that's for autistic people in general, and, people who struggle with the overstimulation, which I can, which I struggle with myself, is if I go to a shopping center sometimes, I spend a few hours there, and by the time I get home, if I haven't had medications, I just am so exhausted, everything's just taken out and I can't do anything for the rest of the day. But having that sort of decrease, putting the lights down and all of that sort of thing, can also be beneficial for other people. It's introverts surely would enjoy it, right? So it's creating a space for everyone. And I think that's applicable to employees, to customers, to every area of the business world.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that changes to the environment that employers could make to make their workplace more inclusive and welcoming for people on the spectrum not only benefits that population, but it benefits everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Even say, if there are instructions that need to be given, say for an employee, or training, and the instructions are such that it's difficult for the employee to understand or to remember. Maybe the page layout isn't good. Maybe there's paragraphs of text, or the color scheme is confusing. Making that more accessible for people who struggle with those things just makes it easier it makes that learning resource better. And all of a sudden you're training all of your employees faster. If there was a well thought out structure that's the standard that has to be adhered to for that, right? Then that would make it very easy for people who need it to go and transfer that into their own software so that they can manage themselves the way that they need to, right? But by not having these sort of standards that are beneficial, it makes it very difficult for people to help themselves. And even for people who don't struggle with that, setting up those things to make that easier to use can only also be beneficial to people who are normal and able.
Yeah, so it sounds that really clear, structured, consistent communication of expectations and timelines is really important. And again, not just benefits people on the spectrum, but neurotypical people as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, there's some great insights. Is there anything else that you think is important for employees to know? Or, if say I was an employer and you were sitting down having a chat with me, what would you say to me if I was wanting to, employ you? How could I make my workplace more inclusive for you specifically?
I don't actually have a lot to say in that space, mostly because I would be inclined not to tell them I wouldn't want them to know, because I wouldn't want to be prejudged, which is the problem, because these things, even though we've known about them for a long time, are very not well understood, especially by, by people who, by laymen, by people who don't live it or study it. So it's not well understood. And like those examples that I was saying earlier, in order to not be prejudged, it's if you can, it's easier to just not let people know, right? And that's a lot of effort. It would be a lot easier if if you could feel accepted enough in your workplace that that you can be yourself in the workplace, and for it to not take that toll on you, so that you can get home and not just collapse, But that's very much a pipe dream. And that, that's just for me, who maybe doesn't have it anywhere near as hard as some people have it,
Yeah, no, and I hear, your vision of an ideal world and what that looks like. And I think that's something that we can all work towards together and strive towards. And like you were saying, I think it starts with education. Knowledge is what really drives that shift in attitudes, and just starting a conversation, like, for employees and colleagues to really have the confidence to be able to just walk up to someone on the spectrum or anybody who's neurodiverse and ask them for their story. Like, tell me about your story. Tell me about your condition. What does that mean? What does that look like? Like, how does that impact you? And what can we do to sort of support you in your role? Yeah.
You feel like you have to fight tooth and nail for the things that you're owed anyway, to get the same sort of opportunities and level of care. And there are mechanisms in place that are supposed to help that, but they're deeply flawed. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of movement for change at our institutions to talk to the people who are actually affected by this, and ask the question of how can we do better. But I feel
how
like
can they do better?
Well, for starters, ask that exact question. The first step to doing better is to ask, how can we do better? And not just ask the question, but actually put the changes into place. Like as I was saying earlier, most of these changes are beneficial for everyone. It's not, you don't need a single room that's the diversity room that caters for people. You need the entire university to have that culture about it, where there's that flexibility and understanding, and actually providing for the needs of their students, fulfilling their responsibility as an institute. But so the conversation is a lot of the story, I think.
You do have needs that are different to neurotypical people, and I think it's important for educational and workplace institutions to recognize that and to provide you with the necessary support, because looking from a human rights perspective, you have a right to an education and you have a right to work, and I think it's the responsibility and the duty of care for institutions and workplaces to provide you with the support necessary to meet your needs. Like you said, it doesn't just benefit people on the spectrum, it benefits everybody. I know I benefit as a neurotypical person from having regular breaks and being able to get out of my seat and get a glass of water and a snack, and that helps everybody with their focus and in turn their productivity.